Crazy news for Nvidia and AMD and stock investors as new reports show that they are expected to pay 15% of China chip sales revenue to US government. First, 15% of sales is gonna crush margins. And does it make sense for these AI players to do this? Let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for their subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
So first, the news reported and broke out about an hour ago, and it does have a lot of things that give me a lot of questions, right? So we're going to take a closer look at some of the questions that I have, but let's look at the information that we know right now. So based on Financial Times, Nvidia and AMD have agreed to give the United States government 15% of the revenue from chip sales in China. The two chip makers agreed to the financial arrangements as a condition for obtaining export licenses for the Chinese market that were granted last week, according to people familiar with situations, including a US official. So obviously, the first thing that we're gonna try to find out and hopefully get more clarity throughout the days is this true? Right? Is this true? Right now, it's only those familiar with the kind of companies in the position, but we haven't had a clear announcement. Now, I would say something like this would be something that the current administration would be very proud of, right? It gives more money back to the United States. So if I was to guess someone who would give us the update pretty quickly, I would say it would be the White House. Maybe in the upcoming days, we might get a confirmation on this. But right now, this is just reports based on familiar sources. The kind of continues is the US official said Nvidia agreed to pay 15% of the revenue from H20 chip sales in China, and AMD will provide the same percentage for their MI308 chip revenue. Now, for those that might not be too familiar with the semiconductor market, Nvidia and AMD both make AI chips. Now, the best AI chips can't be sent to China, so AMD and Nvidia both designed a weaker down version, and that's the H20 and the MI308. At one point, the Trump administration said, look, you can't even send the weaker version down to China. We're banning those. Now, those are the ones that recently got the kind of nudge. Yes, submit some licenses and we will approve them. So we're still not sending the best chips to China. We're still sending the watered down version. But it seems to be able to send down the watered down version, you have to pay an entry fee. Now, this report comes about 2 days after the Financial Times reported that on Friday, the United States has started to approve some of those export licenses after Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, met with President Donald Trump. So this comes with a lot of questions, and these are the questions that I have. I would love to hear the questions that you might have during the comments, and maybe throughout the upcoming days, throughout the upcoming weeks, we will get updates and I will provide more numbers behind it as well. But first, let's just kind of look at this slideshow. Does it make sense? I think the answer is going to be yes. Let's kind of take a quick example of, let's say, the revenue of China AI chips was about $1. Let's just say it, just to make math easy. And let's say for gross profit for a lot of these companies was about, let's say, 45%. For NVIDIA, it's a little bit higher, and we'll look at some of those numbers maybe in another episode. But for both these companies, it is higher than at least 30%. So revenue here, 45 cents. The US cost is about 15% of that, so 15 cents. So the new gross profit is about 30 cents. So in theory, as long as you had a high enough gross margins, you would be able to still make money out of this. And to my best guess is all the companies, both AMD and Nvidia, will be able to make money out of this. Definitely not at the type of gross margins that they were before, but some money being made is better than no money being made. So that overall is going to be great for the AI market, as it does provide kind of this look. The current administration is getting what they want. They're going to get money with this for the US government, so they're going to continue to allow us to sell. So now I have some questions that I think investors and myself have. So how bad are margins going to take a hit? We don't necessarily get a margin breakdown for the AI space, for the China space, right, in the past. So that hasn't necessarily been true. I wonder if the current result is going to force companies like Nvidia and AMD to kind of break this out a little bit more, as this is something that investors are going to be curious about. Now, if you want to do some reverse math, the easiest thing to do is both NVIDIA and AMD did an SEC report when the AI market was removed from China. They gave you how much they were having to write off of inventory. And then in the upcoming earnings, they also gave you a breakdown of how much that included of revenue hit. So if you could do, or if you could break down the math, you would actually kind of get the gross profit margins. Now, for both companies, it's a lot higher than 15%, and that's why I mentioned for both companies, it still makes sense for them to do it, but you will see kind of a profit margin hit. Now, the next question is, can AMD and Nvidia increase the prices of those China chips to be able to maybe eat up some of the costs? It's always going to be 15% no matter the price, but you will still be able, if you increase the price, at least you're able to make more money for yourself. But how much can it actually grow due to competitive pressure, right? You do still have Huawei over there producing AI chips. I don't think AMD could increase their prices too much because one of the biggest things with AI is the ability to scale out into massive AI infrastructure. And AMD doesn't have that capabilities. Huawei does, Nvidia does. For that reason, I don't believe AMD can do much of a price increase. Nvidia does have their NVLink solution, their NV switch solutions, where they can scale out to thousands and thousands of chips throughout kind of these platforms and still be very effective. And for that reason, I do believe NVIDIA has the opportunity to kind of see some price increase. Not much because there is that competitive pressure for Huawei. Now, the next question I actually have, and this is one that I've been thinking about and I've talked about in, I don't know if it was another live stream or another episode, the potential of an H20 ban. The AI chip that just got approved. And you might be, Jose, why would the United States want to ban the H20? Aren't they just going to be making from it? I don't see this being as a ban from the United States. But what about a potential ban from China? That could create some massive negative pressure for NVIDIA. And the reason I think about that is because in the past few months, in the past few weeks, we've actually keep hearing this. The Chinese state media says that NVIDIA's H20 chip is not safe for companies. They're trying to pose this security risk for the H20. And that alone could go with the Chinese officials, Chinese governments can say, look, first, you're not sending us the best chips. You're definitely not. So these H20, these watered down chips, Huawei might not be an equivalent, but it's somewhat competitive. Our company should focus on buying Huawei instead of buying down a watered down AI chip from NVIDIA, the H20. Again, Huawei has the capabilities to scale out, and that's something that's pretty amazing in the AI space. Now, the second talking point that the Chinese government can go is like, wait, now if we buy chips from China, not only do they obviously get the tax on earnings that the United States government would get, but now they actually get a 15% revenue share on that chip. Now our Chinese companies are giving money to the US government directly, right? It's exactly that 15% revenue share. And for that reason, I believe that now it has become an increased probability, not a guaranteed, but I wouldn't be shocked if in the near future, China actually puts a ban on the H20. And some people might say, Jose, you don't know what you're talking about. NVIDIA is the only GOAT player and China needs H20. I think for now they do. But you do see that competitive pressure from Huawei. There are plenty of research out there how Huawei is somewhat competitive. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one thing, but now it doesn't have to be a one-to-one thing, right? Because with the H20, you're getting a weaker down chip, and now you're fueling the opposition government, right? The United States being kind of the opposition of China, right? So you start to see, does it make sense for us to buy H20? Is the Chinese government going to start opposing it for this like that? So I do believe the risk has increased here a bit, but it's not guaranteed. But it is something that I will kind of keep a closer eye on. Now, the other question that I have, and I believe the question that I just mentioned is probably the most important, and we'll have to kind of understand how things progress throughout the upcoming quarter, see how, if we see any new updates or news reports that kind of show that similar thought. But the final thing is, Did AMD know about this prior to earnings? And is that the main reason it didn't share guidance for China? Is it that if they would have shared guidance, it would have kind of created some questions of, look, your margins, you're expecting to grow into revenue in China, but your margins aren't really that good. What's happening there? So I wonder if because they couldn't share some of the information, they had to opt out with the Chinese guidance. Now, I would love to hear or see if AMD in the upcoming days, now that this news has come out, once we get confirmation from the United States government, if AMD can kind of give us an outlook of revenue expectations, including the Chinese market now, so we can kind of see the projections in here. But regardless, I think in the short term, this is very, very bullish for AMD and Nvidia. It kind of almost nearly guarantees that they are going to be able to send the MI308 and the H20 to China. So another thing that we did learn here is that for Nvidia, there's most likely none, absolutely no China revenue in this quarter that they're going to repeat. And the reason I thought there could have been a possibility is the NVIDIA news of kind of exports came out in July 16th that the United States government was set to approve. That was about 15 days before quarter two ended for them. So there were about 15 days. If they did get the approved, they would have been able to send some chips to China. But now it seems like those approvals are just happening right now. So I would love to get that update during their quarter two earnings of what this company now expects with the Chinese space. So very bullish. Obviously, margins are going to take a hit. But for all these companies, the biggest market for them is obviously the United States and other parts of the world. But it is crucial for them to sell in China. Now, NVIDIA and AMD can also probably do things like maybe sell more software solutions into those industries, or kind of increase, NVIDIA, for example, increase some of the prices of their software space in China to make up some of the margins there as well. So there are other ways that NVIDIA and AMD could kind of play this to maybe get some of the margins that they are losing in that industry. But like we saw with the quick math, any form of revenue is better and any form of earnings is better than all earnings. And again, you're able to increase your developer ecosystem as China has a huge amount of developers as well. So it seems to be like a win-win for semiconductor companies and a win for the US government. I would love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.